Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf. Normally you might expect, if you're following my channel for any length of time, Sunday Books Weekly, but I already talked when I made the video about my 2018 plans that the Books Weekly might develop into a Books Bi-Weekly and that I might find other ways to wrap up what I read every week or every 2 weeks. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to group together the books that I read for book clubs, mainly Goodreads book clubs, but also buddy reads or real life book clubs, because I showed them on the new arrivals video, and I think then I thought it might be a good idea to also group the wrap up together. So today is my sort of January book club reads wrap up. And the first book I want to talk to you about is A Golden Age by Tahmima Anam. And this book was published in 2005. And I read this book for the book club Read Around the World book club, in which we read a different book from a different country written by a woman each month. The club is run by Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventure. And for all the book clubs and channels, I will leave the information down below. So Tahmima Anam was born in 1975 in Dhaka in Bangladesh. She studied anthropology, started writing. She was educated in Paris and New York, and she now lives in London. And this book, as I said, published in 2005, was her debut novel. The book is set in Dhaka, then East Pakistan in 1971, before the split between Pakistan and Bangladesh. It was East Pakistan, and we follow a main character, Hana, I think her name is pronounced, a young widow who just recently lost her husband quite suddenly, and she has two almost grown-up children, so end of high school, beginning of university, and we follow her and the two children, the neighbors, during those months that the Bangladesh Liberation War took place. So what Anam does is she uses the family as protagonists to show what happened in Dhaka and in East Pakistan during that time. I really enjoyed reading the book, not only because, shame on me, I know very little about the Bangladesh Liberation War. I leave a link down below if you're interested to read up on it, as I did. But it's also a really moving, well-written, lyrically written family story. So it's not a dry political novel. If you got that impression, then I didn't explain it very well, but it is a family story, but the backdrop is the Bangladesh Liberation War, and we learn something about that war as well. So if you are interested in things like that, in expanding your horizon, reading about Bangladesh, this is certainly a recommendation. And afterwards, I learned when I checked out the author Tahmima Anam that this is actually the first book in a Bangladesh trilogy. The second book, A Good Muslim, was published in 2006, I believe. Well, the right year will be down in the description box. And then the last one was published in 2011. And she follows the development of Bangladesh, obviously, in that trilogy. So I'm really interested in reading more, and I will certainly pick up the other two books in the course of the year. And I talked a little bit also about this book club that Mel initiated, and the idea that you read your way around the world. And if you think this idea, if it appeals to you, but you might not want to join the book club, then I want to at least point out Sophie from Portal in the Pages. She this year set herself a challenge to read around the world. She will not only read books written by women like we do in the book club, but she has 194, I think, countries, and for each country she will read a book and she will talk about it. So I leave a link to the playlist she made so far down in this description box as well. And the second book and the second book club is a short story collection, and that's Almost Famous Women by Mayhew Bergman. This book I read for the book club Tales and Co. And in that book club, we read, we alternate reading a nonfiction, then a short story collection with historical fiction, and we read translated fiction written by women. So this was the pick for February for a short story collection with historical fiction. And Mayhew Bergman is an American writer. She was born in North Carolina, and she lives now in Vermont. And this collection is, as I said, historical fiction. So it's about like the title says, Almost Famous Women. And actually it's a sort of a two-part collection, because one part, the first 8 or 9 stories, are about women who did something extraordinary or had an extraordinary life for some reason and were almost famous because of that, but are all but forgotten. So we have, an aviator, we have somebody who is an oil heiress and made her living in Nigeria. So you have all kinds of different women, and in the back of the book, Bergman explains how she got the idea, and you learn something about the real life of the women. And the second part of the collection are Almost Famous Women because they have a famous family member. So Oscar Wilde's niece and Lord Byron's illegitimate daughter. So women who might be famous because of a certain family connection but weren't. And what Bergman does is, each of these women, she picks one aspect of the life and makes a story around it. So, of course, it's only a snippet. It's only, one aspect that she then makes into fiction, into historical fiction. But I really enjoyed this collection very much, and I have to say I'm not a very big short story reader. I hardly ever read short stories, so I was kind of hesitant going in, but I thought, well, expanding your horizon, that's why you are in book clubs. And I ended up really enjoying it, as it often is the case, of course, with a short story collection. At least that's my experience. You will not love all of the, I think it's 15 or 20 stories in that. You will not love all of them equally. At least it almost never happens with me when I read short stories that I find all the short story equally fantastic. But there are at least half of them I thought were really, really extraordinary. Bergman has a very distinct way of giving those women a voice, and it's a different voice each time. So you learn something about the women, and there's additional information. So you can, if you're interested, you can look up what did the woman do, in her life. But I think it really works as a collection because it's such an array of almost famous women, and I think I would say 90% of the women I've never heard of. So if you're interested in reading short stories, short story collections, then this is certainly a good pick. The language is really beautiful. It's very quiet, very almost subdued, the way Bergman writes, but you get a feel for the women instantly. At least that was my impression. So I really enjoyed reading this. And I should have mentioned the book club Tales & Co. is run by Yamini. She used to have a booktube channel, The Skeptical Reader, but I don't think she makes booktube videos anymore because the channel has been disabled. There are no more videos to be seen, but she still has a blog. And as I said already, I will leave a link to that blog in the description box. And the third and final book club read for January, I think I said February for the last book, but of course it was January because it's not even February yet. Anyway, so the third and final read for my January book club reads was Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. I don't think Hilary Mantel needs much of an introduction. She's an English writer. she wrote novels, but also memoirs. But she's most famous for her Thomas Cromwell novels, and this one, Wolf Hall, is the first in a trilogy. She won the Booker Prize with it in 2009, and that's why we read it, because the book club is called Man Bookering, and we read the long list and of the Man Booker and the Man Booker International, and in between we read the backlist by which I mean the previous winners, and the January pick was Wolf Hall. And by the way, Man Bookering is run by Max, who used to make fantastic booktube videos over at his channel, Well Done Books, and occasionally he now comes back. So yeah, Max, please make more videos. Anyway, Wolf Hall and the rest of the trilogy follows Thomas Cromwell during a politician, a lawyer during the reign of Henry VIII. So in this first installment, we follow the Thomas Cromwell from his childhood. The book starts in 1500. We learn a little bit about Thomas Cromwell's childhood. He's had a rough childhood with an abusive father, and then he leaves and goes on to travel, and we make quite a big jump when Cromwell returns. He is already a successful lawyer working for Henry VIII. The time is, in England, is the time that Henry VIII wants to get an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, because they have a daughter, Mary, but she, as if it's her fault, she couldn't produce an heir. And that's why he wants to get an annulment in order to be able to marry Anne Boleyn. And then, of course, as you know, the Pope wouldn't grant an annulment, and Henry VIII splits from Rome and founds his own church, the Church of England. So that is the setting of the book between 1500 and 1535, just when Anne Boleyn became queen. And it's quite a thick book, as you can see, and I'm having trouble keeping it up because it's so heavy. And a lot of people in the comments when I hauled this book, when I showed it that I'm going to read it, said, well, I'm so curious what you think of it. And it was actually a reread for me, because I read it already when it came out in 2009, or maybe I read it in 2010. And it's a difficult book in a way to talk to me about, because it's a fantastic book. Hilary Mantel has a very own, very unique style of writing historical fiction. You get very little information in the sense of info dumps. She doesn't do info dumps. You learn about the characters through their actions and through the dialogues they have, and through very minor details of a personal life, like when Thomas Cromwell has a discussion with his wife, Liz, for instance. So the main events that you might know going into that book, like, for instance, the big, religious issue, whether Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine would be annulled, are almost only mentioned in passing, which is, I think, one of the great strengths of this book, that it's not an historical novel focusing on those big events, but it's focusing on the people. And like I said, Mantel has a fantastic way of writing it. You really feel that she is in total command of the material. If you read historical fiction before, you will know what I mean, that when you read a book, you just know the author is in command of the story, and that she knows everything. But it's just not my kind of book, I have to say, and it didn't change with the reread. So it's a book that I can see why people love it, and why it's a really good book, but it's just not my cup of tea. I'm not a big fan of historical fiction anyway. That might be it. Tudor history is not something that I'm really, really very interested in. Maybe that is the reason. I can't really explain it. I can just say it's a fantastic book, but not for me. So this was it for my January book club reads wrap up. I hope you like this new format, because I actually want to do it every month. So you better like it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Talk to me in the comments if you read any of the books and what you think about it, or if you want to talk about any other book-related subject. And I'll see you all again soon in my next video. Bye-bye.